Let's continue now with Canada's self-described Prince of Pot. He is now on his way to a U.S. prison. Marc Emery is set to spend up to 5 years behind bars for selling marijuana seeds by mail. And that breaks the U.S. law. He turned himself into police in Vancouver just a few weeks ago. But since then, marijuana activists across the country have demanded that Ottawa not send Mr. Emery to the U.S., and they've been staging sit-ins at Conservative MP offices. The question is, are more and more elaborate protests planned? For more on that, I'm joined now by Jodie Emery. That's Marc Emery's wife, and she's with Jacob Hunter from whyprohibition.ca, one of the organizers of the protests, and they're both in Vancouver. Jodie, just give us an update. Where's your husband as we speak?
I believe he has probably just left the federal court at 2:30 Pacific time. He made his initial appearance, and I want to apologize for my voice, but we just marched through the streets of Vancouver with a couple hundred people in protest of Marc's transfer to the United States today.
Jacob, we've talked before about this and about some protests in front of MPs' offices, you know, and the occupying of MPs' offices. Now that he's actually going to the States, what will happen to these protests?
Well, these protests are going to continue, and they're going to get bigger, and there's going to be more of them. Yesterday, we occupied Stephen Harper's office for 4 hours, and despite multiple requests from the Prime Minister's office directly to the Calgary Police to have us extricated and as removed and arrested, Calgary Police upheld our right to protest inside. We will be protesting at every single Conservative Member of Parliament's office, and once we've gotten to all of them, we'll start over at the beginning. This will not stop until Marc is home or this government is defeated.
Yeah, tough words here, Jodie Emery. I'm going to quote what you said yesterday in front of Stephen Harper's Calgary constituency office. Quote, "I promise you, Stephen Harper, we will hound you until you are nothing but an unpleasant memory." Why are you directing your anger at Stephen Harper?
Well, Stephen Harper is in charge of this government, and in Canada, the leaders of the political parties whip their members into line. So I hold Stephen Harper responsible for whatever the Conservative Party cabinet and members of Parliament do. And yesterday, when we were in Stephen Harper's office, there were sit-ins happening in 5 different offices. And before that, we've occupied at least 8. And this will continue, because when Marc went to prison, he made us promise that we would be relentless and merciless in hounding this Conservative government, not only for what they've done to him, but for what they're planning to do to everybody in Canada, how they're stripping away our rights, how they're attacking the environment, they're destroying the economy, they're spending so much money on a war abroad that nobody really supports.
But Jodie Emery, I understand that there's a political motive, and we're just seeing live pictures of you just earlier at this protest in Vancouver. But Jodie Emery, I don't get this. Your husband knowingly broke American laws. Why isn't he prepared to face the consequences?
He was prepared to face the consequences. He knowingly broke Canadian laws. In order to be extradited, it must be a crime in both countries. Marc is a Canadian citizen who never left Canada. He sold seeds in Canada for over a decade. He paid taxes on all the income. He sent seed catalogs to every member of Parliament. Health Canada directed people to get seeds from him. And in 2003, the Vancouver Police tried to have Marc charged, but the Crown refused and said there was no interest because it only gets a small fine here in Canada. The Vancouver Police handed the file over to the Drug Enforcement Administration, and when they picked up the file and arrested Marc, they declared in their press release that it was a significant blow to a marijuana legalization movement, and they declared Marc Emery a seed seller, the #1 most wanted drug trafficking kingpin in Canada. Now that's absurd, considering all the gangs and all the hard drugs that are being moved around. But my husband has been a thorn in the side of government for his entire career, breaking unjust laws. He broke Sunday shopping laws, music and literature censorship laws. He's gone to fight against unjust laws all of his life, and he was fully expecting that if the Canadian government and laws would hold him accountable here, they would. We didn't expect that the Canadian government and Canadian law enforcement would sell out a Canadian citizen to the American justice system.
Jacob, what would you like to see happen now?
I'd like to see Marc Emery brought home, and I'd like to see this government defeated. I know it may sound a little repetitive, but you know, it's worth repeating. Stephen Harper needs to be defeated. You were just talking about abortion. You know, there's so many different things this government is declaring war on in Canadian culture. This is about
I understand that you may not like the government, but just specifically about Marc Emery, you don't like this government, but you want them to now reverse it and demand that Marc Emery comes back to Canada and to face any charges at all?
We'd like them to resume treaty transfers. I mean, they've actually refused any transfer of anyone who's been convicted of a drug crime. Up until this government, treaty transfers, that is bringing Canadians home from prison abroad, was standard practice. This government has ended that, and specifically for anyone that's in jail on a drug crime.
And we also want to punish this government because they inflict suffering and pain on so many people. Consider that I am without my husband now, and yes, he did break the law, but he never left Canada. He did it all within Canada. As a Canadian citizen, he should have been dealt with here. The Justice Minister had the opportunity to say no extradition. We had a coalition of the NDP, Liberals, and Conservatives submit 12,000 petitions into Parliament. We've had 5 years of campaigning with phone calls, letter writing, visiting MPs, but none of that has really worked. So we have to step it up and take it directly to the individuals and let them know that we're furious. And we also want to inspire the rest of Canada to take it directly to your MP. For too long, the members of Parliament have been arrogant and detached from the rest of Canadian society. They're paid for by our tax dollars. They are our employees, and they shouldn't be allowed to hide behind secretaries and ignore petitions and phone calls and the majority of Canadian public opinion who say marijuana should be legalized and who thought Marc Emery should not be extradited. So this government not only needs to be punished for doing it, but they also need to be prevented from doing more harm to Canada and Canadians.
Just now, we understand, just a last question. So the question is, how far will you go? Obviously, there's a lot of passion, and you've got pretty strong opinions about the government, but meanwhile, your husband's in the U.S. How far will this protest go? You've shut down some streets. You've occupied some MPs' offices. How much farther will this go?
We refuse to be violent. I want to make that clear. We are going to be peaceful and non-violent, but we are going to be passionate and dedicated because for too long Canadians have sit back and let the government run roughshod over us and Americanize our country in so many ways. And if we can stand up for Marc and show that Canadians, taking a stand, maybe it won't make a difference, but then that would be a sad commentary on democracy.
All right, Jacob, you want to get a last word in there?
Well, just say, how far we'll take it to every other group that has a problem with this government. I mean, Jodie's quite honest when we say we hope this inspires everyone. We hope the environmentalists occupy Stephen Harper's office. We hope that homeless rights advocates occupy Stephen Harper's office. We hope that everybody, the 70% of Canadians who have not voted for Stephen Harper, stand up and exercise the constitutional rights that they have as Canadians.
But guys, so I got to wonder, is this just political cover to make some anti-conservative smear campaign, or are you just advocating for your husband here? I'm trying to get a handle on this because,
Why can't it be both? Why can't it be both? Marc represents hundreds of thousands of people locked away, and that's why this Saturday there's a worldwide rally to free Marc Emery. In 11 countries with over 60 cities, we have organized supporters. This isn't going to end because Marc has far more support than people think. And it's about freeing Marc. It's about freeing all
prisoners. Why don't you take your
of the drug
protest to
war.
the DEA in the U.S.?
Well, there will be people taking it to the DEA, but we're here in Canada. And up until this point, the Canadian government, the ball was in their court, and now they've tossed Marc over to the border, to Americans, one of the worst prison systems in the world. And that's entirely unjust because he's a Canadian citizen who did not leave Canada, who sold seeds, which would get a fine here. He was facing life in prison and under great duress took a 5-year plea deal. I think it's incredibly cruel, and this government is out to punish people and punish the cannabis culture and punish so many, because that's all they care about. This government doesn't care about the environment, the economy, the future of Canada.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there, but we'll be watching how, if indeed this protest about marijuana and your husband's now detention and imprisonment in the U.S. will lead to different political issues joining on side. Jodie Emery, Marc Emery's wife, and Jacob Hunter, one of
Free Marc Emery.
One of the protest organizers. Thanks for talking to us today.
Thank you.